still see her face and hear her name daily. JonBenét, the little girl beauty queen, found molested and murdered in her own home. This past week, her brother and sister were publicly ruled out as suspects.
John, Andrew, and Melinda are being publicly cleared of the involvement in this case to relieve them of stress caused by inappropriate speculation.
Although John Ramsey has been ruled out as the person responsible for writing the ransom note, you'll meet a handwriting expert today who has evaluated the Ramsey signatures and says you'll be intrigued by what she claims the signatures reveal. And while JonBenét's pediatrician said there's never been any indication of sexual abuse, we'll meet a woman who believes JonBenét may have been sexually abused in her short life. And while we all want closure for this tragic murder, for the sake of the surviving family, we can only hope the parents are cleared of all suspicions. JonBenét is not the only child we read about these days. What about the boy who had his mouth taped shut by his teacher? And the little girl who claimed she was grabbed so hard by her teacher, her neck was dislocated. It should be a compelling and provocative hour. I hope you'll join us today on Leeza Kids in the News. JonBenét to our schools. Come on back. To meet my guest. Andrea McNichol is one of the foremost handwriting experts whose credentials include the Ted Bundy serial murder case and the O.J. Simpson criminal trial. She is currently evaluating the JonBenét case, where she has examined handwriting samples of Mr. and Mrs. Ramsey. She will tell us, in her opinion, about the personality traits revealed in their writings. We'll also meet Sherry Carney, an attorney who specializes in child abuse cases, and private investigator Ron Farmer, who will explain why the parents have not been brought in for questioning. Welcome to all three of you. Thank you. We have blown up the handwriting samples that were supplied. Can you give us some indication?
Okay, well, let's start with the father, JonBenét Ramsey, and this signature on top is from a 1978 document that became part of a court case. And here, his signature leans to the left, and it's got giant loops, and it was legible. In the blow-up process, it got a little deformed looking there. And he has these giant lower loops. This signature, when you lean your writing to the left, it means repression. It means you hold back real emotional feelings. You say one thing and think another. And for those people who do write leftward, everybody's got something screwed up about them, so they shouldn't worry about that.
We don't want to send anybody out to be analyzed. Now, you have a more recent signature that is way different from that one.
Right. This was the shock from a graphological point of view from my profession. This is something that you go, is when you've gone from this signature to this. And
that's the same person wrote that?
This is the same person. This is JonBenét Ramsey. This is the father of JonBenét. And this is his signature on another document that was made public. So,
which looks like just a bunch of scribble.
It is just a bunch of scribble. There's two aspects here. One is the fact that there's such a dramatic change, and the other is the fact that what it changed to. When you don't want any part of the writing to look like there's any semblance of lettering here, it indicates something very serious. You feel as entwined and disguising of yourself as your signature is.
And what about the mother?
Well, the mother, here it's a little bit difficult to see. This was a letter to somebody, and what struck me as very odd, being a mother myself, and having looked at documents for 30 years, was that she had a full sheet of paper, and she chose to put her daughter's name underneath her own, and that the word "and," which this is actually larger than her daughter's name. I was a little horrified from a psychological point of view when I saw that, because it indicates that she wants to be on top of her daughter, that she wants to be superior to, that she feels bigger than.
Does her handwriting indicate any of the mystery or the covering up that you, in your opinion, feel that Mr. Ramsey's represents?
Not nearly to the degree, but when you see a full sample, it does show an alarming sort of association with the material. So that if her sense of security and material wealth might feel threatened, she might then take steps to make that her secure world stays secure.
I know this is your business and that this is a valid tool to use in an investigation, as you have on many criminal cases, but couldn't it just be insignificant? Couldn't it just be that he used to write that way and now he's busy and he's in a hurry?
One could say that. Of course we could say that. From just statistical data and years and years and years of compilation of samples, usually going from this type of legible signature to a huge dominating scrawl is indicative that something terrible has gone on.
I would like for you to explain a little more on the Patsy and JonBenét with her signature or her name being underneath. I put my kid's name underneath, and I don't feel that it's a threat or anything.
Okay, one of the things we always have to do is note time and circumstance. There was plenty of room. In other words, if you're writing on a card, you may not have room to put everybody's name on a horizontal line side by side, but in this instance there was room. It's the fact that not only is it underneath, but it's smaller, it's entangled, and it's not even, JonBenét's name is not even as big as the word and.
So do you feel like she sees her daughter as a possession?
Yes.
In the case of Mr. Ramsey, the radical change, could that be due to the fact that he lost a child? And nothing
He
more?
hadn't lost the child here
That
yet.
was prior to.
This is prior to.
So what do you think was going on with him?
Without, making any accusations or something, normally from a graphological point of view, this is a red flag, and it says something's going on in this person's life.
I know, Sherry, you've had a chance to examine the autopsy report. When we come back, I want to see what conclusions you come to based on what is evidence there. We're going to continue with the case of JonBenét. Please stay close. See you back here. We've just heard some startling evidence in the JonBenét case from experts who have studied the handwriting. And I need to point out that the first signature that we showed was, you said, from a document in the 80s, and the one that had changed so drastically is a more recent signature, but it too is before the murder. Yes. But you feel it's still significant?
Oh, absolutely. It's very significant. This signature was already troubled, and that of a powerful man who's overly materialistic. This signature is now disturbed, if you will, graphologically, and represents a profound negative change going on within the writer.
Sherry, you have had a chance to study the autopsy report. What conclusions have you come to?
First of all, the autopsy report made me want to cry. It had, what the autopsy showed was vaginal erosion, which is erosion inside the tissue of the vagina, which shows that there's been sexual abuse, probably intercourse. This child was 6 years old.
Even though the hymen was not ruptured?
Even though the hymen's not ruptured. A lot of times you don't have the rupturing of the hymen, or it ruptures for some other reason. This child also had, one of the things that was so disturbing was there were abrasions, back of the legs, back of the arms, back of the shoulder. That meant a couple things to me. I am an incest survivor myself, as well as an expert in child abuse cases. And I could feel what this child was going through, having looked at the autopsy. I mean, there was also a rope burn or abrasion on one wrist. I believe that what happened to this child, and the rope that was tied around her was over her pajamas. I believe this child died in the process of being sexually abused. I think the sexual abuse went too far. That's in my expert opinion, and in my heart, that's what I feel.
It has been reported that JonBenét was a bedwetter.
Right.
Is that significant in this story at all?
Very significant. When boys bedwet at age 6, there can be bladder problems, size of urethra. When girls bedwet at age 6, it is one of the clear indicators of childhood sexual abuse. First sign of bedwetting, questions should be asked. Plus, I reviewed some of the tapes of the beauty pageants, and this child had bruises on her. She had bruises on her legs, bruises on her arms, consistent with physical abuse. This child was tortured before she died.
Ron, we've all been confused by the Ramseys' lack of cooperation with the police in regard to giving an in-person interview. Now, is that strange or not?
Well, Lisa, it's very unusual to find witnesses or suspects in a case dictating ground rules to the police. It does change the ground rules. They, most significantly, wanted to be interviewed as a group. From an investigative standpoint, you just don't interview people in a group. You want to interview people individually so that you can establish inconsistencies in their story.
Now, let me make sure I understand you. They have set out stipulations, conditions under which they would agree to an interview, and one of them was, we want to be together.
They have 4 conditions. One of them was that they want to be together. Secondly, they wanted to have a doctor present in case anyone became ill. A third condition would be that the interview not be conducted at police headquarters. Fourthly, they did decline taking a polygraph exam.
Are the police likely to grant these conditions?
Well,
I mean, here's what we need to know. Are they not forced by law to talk?
no.
They're not, are they?
No, as a matter of fact, they are not considered publicly as suspects by the police. They've not been arrested by the police. And the fact of the matter is, either way, they would not have to cooperate with the police's investigation. It is the burden of proof is on the police, and they do not have to be interviewed.
This, of course, is an ongoing investigation. No one has been charged in this case, and while there is evidence of sexual abuse, there has been no one officially linked to that abuse as of yet. I'm sorry I didn't get to your question. I'll pick it up as soon as we can. And wait until you hear, as we talk about kids in the news, what one teacher allegedly did to a 10-year-old that put her in the emergency room. And later, the story about an honor roll student who claims that he was partially strip searched by school officials. We'll tell you why. Please stay close.
Selena, her memory, her music, her magic live on in one of the most anticipated films of the year. The Selena cast, including Jennifer Lopez and Edward James Olmos.
This was the hardest movie I ever made because we were celebrating her life.
And a special interview with the driving force behind the movie, Selena's father.
I wanted to let the public know about the truth of her life.
Your heart and soul is all over that screen.
Selena. Next, Leeza.
Today, kids in the news, and we have started our program with the JonBenét Ramsey murder investigation. Your question?
My question's for Sherry, and after reading the autopsy report, do you feel that JonBenét had been abused for several years, or was this just a recent thing, like in the last few months?
In my opinion, it's been at least 6 months to a year minimum. She had the kind of movements in the pageants, and I've reviewed the videotapes of her pageants, of a child that's experienced intercourse. Not a child pretending to be sexual, but a child who was indeed sexualized.
Let me introduce you to a young girl also in the news. This is 10-year-old Laurie.